Thanks so much for having me on. Yeah, I'm doing great. I've been incredibly busy these past couple of weeks, getting ready for the March for Medicare for All in Boston this Saturday. So I've been working with Kyle Davis. He's the organizer for that march the past couple of days. And I've just been really busy, like on my show and with FHL. So I'm doing good.
Hell yeah. Let's talk about the march for a minute, because the organizers of that have just been getting brutalized since the inception, since they announced. Yeah, and this is something that I think is so emblematic of larger problems, not just on the left or in politics, but with the whole country. Um, the infiltration of the Medicare for All march, or the March for Medicare for All, um, that specific incident, where, to the best of my knowledge, from the best of what I can tell and understand, the person involved, or like the horrible person that got, everybody in trouble, didn't even know that he was being added to this thing, had nothing to do with it, at no point had agreed to speak at a march, let alone a march for Medicare for All. And it was a setup from start to finish by someone who like got into, I guess, planning or organizing or whatever one of the marches. Do you have more detail or better detail about that? Like, just how dumb was it, and why haven't we been able to make it blow up in those people's faces?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, I was on vacation when this happened, but I saw the tweets in the DM group. So first thing I thought was, oh, well, that's strange. There wasn't a march scheduled in Muncie, Indiana. So I knew something was off. But basically, to make a long story short, yes, there was an infiltrator that made their way in, and they somehow got a hold of our graphics. And so they were able to take that guy's face, who is a Nazi supporter, put him on the graphics, tweet it out, put it on Instagram, and make it seem like, number one, there was a march scheduled there, which there wasn't, and number two, that this guy was going to be a speaker. Of course, it made its way around social media. So there were a lot of attacks that came our way. But the attacks that came our way were from other people on the left. And even though the organizers were able to retract that, and very quickly, by the way, they handled that very quickly. They were able to retract it, and they were able to explain to everybody, this is what happened. We'll make sure this will not happen again. People are still coming after them on Twitter. I know Savage Joy has received like threats from people to the point where at one point she had to make her Twitter private. And again, this is coming from people on the left, and some of the same people who were attacking us in the beginning when the marches were even announced. So this started before that happened. I want to make that very clear to everybody. There is this segment of people on the left who don't want to, I guess, push issues unless it's done through electoral politics. And then there's a segment of us that's like, we don't need to wait for politicians. We can do this ourselves with the people. And there is that divide. They've been hating on us and coming after us from the very beginning since it was announced. And it's really disappointing. I feel that these are deeply unserious people. They obviously don't care as much as they say they do about everyone getting health care in this country. And it's just really unfortunate. We all should have been coming together to push for this instead of creating this division.
So, I mean, just from what I can tell, these are operators working on behalf of the Democratic Party in the DNC, or at least in Jeff's case, the Florida Democratic Party. Although I think he's got national ambitions. When you say they're deeply unserious people, I agree broadly, but I think they're very, very serious about making sure the status quo is preserved. I think they're very serious about stomping down any effective direct action that's coming from the working class, regardless of whether they're right or left. And when you watch these people operate, their favorite thing to do is make a leftist a Nazi. And if you can tie anyone that people rightly or wrongly assume is on the left to a far right group, you have, all right, man, my work is done. I have confused at least enough people to hinder the success of whatever event they were trying to pull off. I have
Yep.
ginned up enough fake outrage from my troll farms, and my fucking bot accounts, to where there's now an open debate going on in the digital space that is removed from reality and ridiculous. Everyone's having an imaginary debate about an imaginary thing, and people are getting emotional because why are we talking about this dumb shit when these things are happening? We have to have this debate. Are you kidding me? Because it's bullshit, and here's why. And then that becomes the conversation. So
Yep.
again, for the operators on the part of the DNC, that's motherfucking mischief managed. It is. And all these people have to do is prevent you from checking off your to-do list for today.
Yep.
And if they could just keep that list incomplete, they don't have to prevent everything on it from happening. They just got to make sure that you don't get to check off your list every day. That's good enough for them because they've already got the resources, and they've already got the politicians, and they've already got the courts, and they've already got the fucking, the fucking media. So, it is at that point when I'm like, well, let's just embrace everybody and see what happens, because I'm pretty sure that there aren't going to be too many people on the right that would want to march for Medicare for all in general. But if you can look past the politics a little bit and generate the same sort of spirit of Occupy, I think that we have an opportunity to reclaim agency without having to go through either political party to do it.
Exactly. I mean, that's the whole point too, is that what I want people to understand is the fact that all of these organizers and activists were able to get together and make this happen. I don't even live in the same state as a lot of these people. Like, we're in different time zones. Most of us have not seen each other in person. So the fact that we were able to pull this all together, I think deserves a huge applause. And what people have to understand is that every movement has infiltrators. Bernie had to deal with this with his campaign. It does happen, but we're really trying to push for people, everybody, to have health care in this country. And them attacking us, it's not stopping us. It's actually helping things increase because we now have 50 cities on the list. So all they really did was just give us more attention.
Yeah, and I mean, and congratulations, by the way, on getting 250 cities. That's incredible. I went on Twitter at the beginning of the week just to be like, okay, look, dude, this isn't my cause or my focus, but I stand with all of these people and the organizers because what's being done to them is nearly identical to what we get in the Assange community, and it's a lot of the same bad actors that are involved in the disruption and the infiltration and the fucking campaigns of shit talkery. We went, and at the beginning of the year, we were in DC for a couple of Assange events that we had organized around his extradition verdict. that was being read off on January 4th. January 2nd, 3rd, and 4th were force the vote events. And then January 6th. And so it was in that week, I got to DC on New Year's Day. In that week, on the 4th, we were standing in front of the building where AOC works. The building where she was, where she was hiding in fear for her life. That building where the security guard checking on her as the person who she thought was coming to murder her, or who did murder her. That's right. She was murdered that day. She died. We have AOC, the resurrection. Sandy, the reborn, is who is, a congresswoman now. But we were standing there, 45, 50 of us. Not a lot. They made a field day out of the underattended force the vote events when nobody except for the people that were going promoted it, and this is what kills me about the whole force the vote shit. I don't even know if I've ever talked about this. What kills me about it is that the people who went to DC for force the vote were never included in the weeks leading up to it in any of the conversations about this thing has become about so-and-so's personality. This thing has become about so-and-so not liking this person. And now, at no point did anyone bring on anybody that was going to put themselves physically in the street over it. And so not only did the actual fucking action get completely left out of the conversation in the weeks going up to it, it sucked all the air out of the internet for people like us who were gathering around the extradition verdict of the biggest press freedom trial in fucking history. No oxygen in the internet for that. It became a pissing contest over a handful of personalities, and that defined it. But when we were standing on the ground there in front of the Rayburn building, we were horseshoe surrounded by Capitol Police, because it is on the other side of the street from the Capitol. And those same Capitol Police, 2 days later, 48 hours later, were pulling sections of fence aside and waving in people while some of them were shooting at them. But at no point did any of the Stop the Steal protesters feel like they were surrounded or outnumbered by law enforcement. But law enforcement made sure that if you were there to ask politicians to do the thing that they ran on and said they were going to do, that called for you being surrounded by law enforcement. And nobody's really talked about that either, except for me and Niko, because we were standing there looking at each other going, I hope they don't get squirrely. Ooh, fuck. That was nerve-wracking. It was. I felt safer 48 hours later at the Trump thing when we walked up to the Capitol, and we're on the steps of the Capitol, not a cop in sight.